Welcome back, fourth graders, to Thursday, your last day of work for the week. Tomorrow, just to let you know, you will have an extra credit assignment if you choose to do so. But if you do choose to do so, your name will go into the drawing multiple times, so good luck. Today we read Chapter 8, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, adapted from the story by Washington Irving, and we will learn more about him a little bit later. So our big question, why do people believe a headless horseman haunts the village of Sleepy Hollow? I've heard that your teacher has actually been to Sleepy Hollow before. It is right next to her hometown where she grew up, and she's been there and seen a play there and walked around and visited shops. So here we go. Not far from the eastern shore of the Hudson River is a little valley known as Sleepy Hollow. A drowsy, dreamy atmosphere hangs over the valley as if it were under the sway of some bewitching power. The valley abounds with local tales, haunted spots, and twilight superstitions. But the dominant spirit that haunts the region is the sight of a ghostly figure on horseback without a head. It is said to be the spirit of a Hessian soldier whose head was carried away by a cannonball during the Revolutionary War. The ghost is said to ride out nightly to the scene of the battle in search of his head and to return to the churchyard before daybreak. In this out-of-the-way place, there lived a teacher by the name of Ichabod Crane. His name was well suited to him. He was tall and very lanky, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, and hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves. He had huge ears, large green eyes, and a long nose. To see him striding along on a windy day with his clothes fluttering about him, one might have mistaken him for a scarecrow. From his schoolhouse, his pupils could be heard reciting their lessons. They were occasionally interrupted by the voice of the master or the sound of his switch. According to custom, Ichabod Crane was boarded and lodged at the houses of the farmers whose children he taught. He lived with each family a week at a time. His arrival at home caused great excitement, for the ladies thought his taste and accomplishments superior to those of the rough country farmers. He had read many books. He was a perfect master of Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft. He himself was a firm believer in witches. Ichabod would sit in the schoolhouse after the students had departed, reading old Mather's books until dusk. Then, as he made his way back to where he was staying, every sound of nature encouraged his overexcited imagination. He loved to pass along winter evenings with the farmers' wives as they sat spinning by the fire. He listened with interest to their tales of ghosts and goblins and other headless horsemen. But the cost of the pleasure in all this was the terror of his walk home. What fearful shapes and shadows jumped across his path? How often did he dread to look over his shoulder for fear of catching a glimpse of some ghostly being close behind him? Katrina Van Tassel, the only child of a rich farmer, found favor in Ichabod's eyes, not merely for her beauty, but for her vast inheritance. Her father was a thriving farmer, and his barn was filled with the fruits of his labor. Sleek porkers grunted in their pens. Regiments of turkeys went gobbling through the farmyard. The teacher's mouth watered as he pictured every pig roasted with an apple in its mouth, and every turkey wearing a necklace of savory sausages. As he cast his eyes upon the trees laden with fruit and considered the obvious wealth that surrounded him, he became determined to win the affections of the farmer's daughter. However, he was not the only suitor. The most formidable of all was a local hero known as Brom Bones. He was a burly young fellow, famous for his horsemanship and always ready for a fight or some fun. Whenever a crazy prank occurred in the neighborhood, people whispered that Brom Bones must be at the bottom of it. When Brom Bones began wooing Katrina, most other suitors gave up the chase, but Ichabod Crane continued to hope he might convince Katrina to marry him. He was therefore delighted when he received an invitation to attend a party at the Van Tassels' home. When the day arrived, he dismissed his pupils an hour early. He brushed his old black suit and fussed over his appearance. He borrowed a horse so that he could arrive gallantly mounted. The horse was gaunt and old. His mane was knotted with burrs, and he was blind in one eye. Ichabod was a suitable figure for such a steed. His elbows stuck out like grasshoppers, and as he rode, his arms flapped like a pair of wings. By the time he arrived, many people from the surrounding countryside were already gathered in the home of Van Tassel. Many beautiful young women stood shoulder to shoulder, but what caught our hero's gaze as he entered the home was the sight of a table piled high with food. There were sweet cakes and short cakes, ginger cakes and honey cakes. There were roasted chickens, slices of glazed ham, and smoked beef. There were apple and peach and pumpkin pies and delectable dishes of preserved plums. As Ichabod sampled every dainty, he chuckled to think that he might one day be lord of all this splendor. Ichabod danced proudly with Katrina, his loosely hung friend clattering about the room, while Brom Bones sat brooding by himself in the corner. When the party began to break, Ichabod stayed behind to have a little talk with Katrina. He was fully convinced that he was now on the high road to success. However, Ichabod's talk did not go well, for he soon sadly departed. He went straight to the stable and with several hearty kicks galloped off into the night. It was the bewitching time of night, and as Ichabod made his way home, all the ghost stories that he had heard over the years now came to mind. The night grew darker. The stars seemed to sink deeper in the sky. Ichabod had never felt so lonely. A splash beside the bridge caught his ear. In the darkness, he caught sight of something huge, misshapen, black, and towering. The hair upon his horse rose. Who's there?" he stammered. He received no reply. The shadowy object put itself in motion and bounded into the middle of the road. It appeared to be a large horseman mounted on a black horse. Ichabod quickened his pace in hopes of leaving the mysterious horseman behind. The stranger quickened to an equal pace. The reason for the silence of Ichabod's companion soon became clear. For upon seeing his fellow traveler gigantic in height and muffled in a cloak, Ichabod was horror-struck to notice that he was headless. The figure carried his head before him on a saddle. In terror, Ichabod rained kicks upon his horses. The spirit followed close behind him. Away the two dashed, stones flying. Ichabod cast a fearful look behind to see if he had escaped the other horsemen. Instead, he saw the horseman rising up in his stirrups, preparing to hurl his head at Ichabod. Ichabod tried to dodge the horrible missile, but he was too late. It hit his own head with a tremendous crash. He tumbled into the dust as the rider passed by like a whirlwind. The next morning, Ichabod's old horse was found grazing near the home where Ichabod had been staying. The pupils assembled at the schoolhouse, but no schoolmaster arrived. By the river bank, they found the hat of poor Ichabod, and close beside it, a shattered pumpkin. There was much gossip and speculation about the disappearance of Ichabod Crane. Some said he had been carried off by the headless horseman. Others said he had simply left in humiliation because he did not convince Katrina to be his wife. Shortly after Ichabod's disappearance, Brom Bones triumphantly married Katrina. Whenever the story of Ichabod was told, Bones looked exceedingly knowing. The old country wives, however, maintain to this day that Ichabod was spirited away. It is said that one may still hear his voice humming a tune among the solitude of Sleepy Hollow. About the author. Washington Irving, the author of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, was one of the first American writers to attract attention in Europe. He is perhaps best known as a writer of short stories. However, he wrote an extensive biography of George Washington, and he served as a U.S. ambassador to Spain. Ooh, what a scary story to end today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to look more into Sleepy Hollow, you can Google it and find tons of different things about it. So go ahead and do that. You will have extra credit tomorrow. It will be Chapter 9. If you do it, you will get extra names into the drawing. I hope you guys have a wonderful Thursday, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.